Hi, everybody. I'm Bill with Nutricost, and I'm here with Dr. Skyler Mayne of Maine Performance Labs and BYU Football. He's a sports scientist, and I love all of our guests, but I'm probably the most excited to interview him because this is the stuff I'm personally most interested in. So welcome. Glad to have you here.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Now, before we kind of dive into the sports science side of things, what are just some things outside of that you're passionate about?
Man, my whole life right now just kind of revolves around sport in one way or another.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's all on the spectrum of sport. So, whether it's with my own kids
Right.
or
Mhm.
professionally, I love being active. I love being outdoors, but even more so, I love competition in sports. So,
Yeah. And I totally understand that. People ask me like, what else are you interested in? I'm like, I don't understand the question.
yeah.
Because that's what I love. So let's just get into the sports science stuff then. I think there is maybe some misunderstanding or confusion around what sports science is. It probably
Sure.
gets mistaken for personal training and physical therapy. And what's the difference for those who don't know?
Yeah, so I think it's, the way that I approach it is maybe a little different than conventional sports science. It's plugging in data analytics, really sound training principles, and having some of the medical background that I do. It's tying in, how your body moves, how it functions, all of that, and really trying to optimize performance. The way that I use it, I work with, professional athletes, and we're trying to get every little ounce of performance out of their life. So whether they're recovering from an injury or they're already elite, like what is that next level? And
Right.
so we tie in, whether it's in the weight room or they're sprinting or running or at practice, what data can we gather from that and where can we improve or, really optimize their performance in whatever aspect of their life.
Yeah.
Could be sleep, could be nutrition, it could be all of the above.
Well, I'm glad you said all of those things because we're going to go a little bit deeper on all of it. But now you come from you're a chiropractor, right?
Yeah.
Originally, is that a common background for sports science?
No, I actually think I'm the only one that I know. And the reason I did it, the reason I went and got that schooling was I wanted to understand movement. I wanted to understand kind of the biomechanics of the body, but also didn't want it to just be tied to training or performance. I wanted to, help those who are injured get back quicker.
Right.
And then hopefully develop, a new philosophy, a new system where you weren't getting injured as frequently, or if you were, it wasn't nearly as severe. And so that's kind of what I've set out to do my whole professional career, and it's where I've ended up with where I'm at now.
As being like the only one, what kind of advantages do you think that chiropractor background gives you as a sports scientist?
Yeah, I think, when we have discussions about injury or rehab or getting back to training, understanding, the time tissue takes to heal, or understanding the way different joints move. Initially, like one of the things that first sent me down this path was I was working with runners, and I would have some that when they wanted to sprint, they were being told by a coach they needed to extend more through their hip, and they couldn't create that extension. So, I looked at the body. I knew ways of how I could help create hip extension, physically through different exercises, different, manipulations or adjustments or whatever. And so we did that, and we started to create more motion, and then wanted to layer training on top of that, the right training. So it wasn't just a quick fix and then they had to keep doing something like that. It was more, hey, let's figure out the poor movement, let's fix it, and then let's address it with the correct exercises. And we started seeing people get faster or move better. And that kind of opened my eyes to like, all right, if I understand how the body works at, a movement level or a biomechanical level, how can we then train and optimize it even more? So I wanted to blend all of those worlds instead of keeping them really separate.
Right. And the way your approach sounds is that it's more like looking for the source than just like treating a symptom.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we'll have an athlete that'll come in and maybe their shoulder hurts or their elbow hurts, and you look and they're not rotating appropriately through their opposite hip. And so
Right.
we could treat the shoulder, we could treat the elbow, and sometimes in physical therapy or a chiropractor or a medical doctor, they'll look at it and say, this is what's wrong, but why did it get there?
Yeah.
And if someone has an injury that pops up kind of out of nowhere, like in football, you get hit, that's different. But if something over time kind of comes up, like you got to look at what sent it down that path.
Right.
And if you fix that, a lot of times you just fix the issue instead of, just masking the symptom.
Right. Putting that Band-Aid on it. Now I was looking through your social media because that's what I do, and you'd mentioned once about how there's like all these different names for the type of training, right? Proprioceptive and neuromuscular reeducation and things like that. I did one called prospect training, which I really enjoy. It gets the different sides of the brain talking to each other while you're training. But your end takeaway was that no matter what you call it, like if you want to be at a very high level, you have to have a unique approach to that craft.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? I mean, you've talked a little bit. I mean, obviously you're with BYU, and so you help the football team, but you have athletes from all walks of life, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
I think the thing that I set out to do is to understand my athletes and their goals, right? So you almost reverse engineer it. You say, for example, this summer I was at the Olympics with a couple athletes. They'd already won gold medals. They wanted to repeat and win gold. And so what was going on in their life right now that needed to get better is in regards to their training, right? And so we look at it and you reverse engineer it and you walk it back and you make sure that everything in their life is aligned to help them accomplish that goal. And so sometimes they don't see, the big picture. They're just focused on their one task at hand. It's kind of my job to step back and say, all right, you're doing everything right, but maybe you're not sleeping right. Maybe you're, when we do your blood work, this is off or what have you. And so it gives me, my advantage is I'm not in the heat of the moment as the athlete. I get to step back and have a bigger picture of it. And so in the world, especially with social media, you have so many different people with different opinions out there. And so to simplify it for your athletes and to really say, hey, maybe you don't like working out, maybe you don't like lifting if you're a runner. I have some runners who don't. But if I can apply and say, hey, if you do this in the weight room, here's how to help you from an injury prevention standpoint. Here's how to help your performance in your running. This will actually help you sleep better so you can, recover better in that sense. And so it's taking that 60,000 foot view, bringing it down to them, applying it to them, and helping them focus in on whatever goal they have.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned some people in the Olympics. Outside of football, what are some other sports that you kind of focus on, or is it just everything?
Throughout my career, it's been across the board. I've worked with professional athletes in hockey, MMA, boxing, baseball, all across the board. But right now, really, it's just football. And as funny as it is, the season's offset with professional track. So when football's going, like right now, is professional track's off season. And then when it's off season for football and we're just training for football, it's track's competition season. So they kind of flip. It allows me to do both of them. So those are my main focuses at the moment.
Awesome. So what are some common misconceptions about sports science, and specifically like from athletes and coaches? Like what is it they think that sports science should do that it doesn't, or that it does do that it should?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I think, from a coach's and athlete's perspective, a lot of times and this is how it's set up in a lot of different places. We do it a little differently at BYU, but in a lot of places it's almost restrictive. They're just saying, hey, practice was long, cut back on practice. And it can be a piece of it when you're monitoring all these athletes. So I think that's a misconception that it's just data analytics, right? Like you're just looking analytically at something. And some programs, some professional teams do it that way. But having my own background in playing football and being around it, you have to understand there's a science and an art to it. The science might be the numbers or whatever you're tracking. The artistry is to knowing what to do with that, why you're doing something with that. Everybody wants to make it really fancy. And sometimes it's just when we sit down and we plan out the summer of how we're going to train, how we're going to get faster, it's just sound training principles applied to what we're doing. Same with practice, same with sleep. It's just using the right science that we have, and that's always evolving. So I think that's also another thing that changes is we don't know everything, and so we're constantly trying to hit like a moving target. And that's what's fun with sports science. That's what's fun with performance is as much as we think we know about the body, we don't. As much as we think we know about performance, we don't. They're just kind of a continuing progression. So that's, I think, for me, what makes it fun.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, you look back at training from the 80s or from the 60s and people will laugh and it's like, wait till the 2040s.
Yeah.
Because they're going to look back at what we were doing and they're going to laugh.
Well, and in the same breath, there's stuff that was done in the 70s and 80s that it holds up. It's great. We still do it. Or sometimes it comes back and people are like, wow, this is brand new. And we're like, no, this has been done for forever. I think, we tried to make it really fancy. Sometimes people try to make it really sexy to sell it on social media or whatever. But like, you want to get fast, you got to run fast. You want to get strong, you got to lift heavy weights. And there's nuance to that. But in a nutshell, I mean, there's basic principles that we know.
Yeah. And I do love that when things come back around where it gets like debunked, and then 10 years later, like, actually, this was pretty cool. We're going to bring this back. You know? So, no. I saw a news spot on you where you were talking about helping people prepare for pro day and combine and all that. And you focused a lot on injury prevention.
Yep.
And how do you, as a sports scientist, balance between that optimization and, because optimization people think of as pushing the limits, right?
Yep.
But injury prevention people would think not be that. So how do you balance those two?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when it comes to sport, when it comes to training, you are trying to push the envelope. At least that's my approach. Is you find the ceiling. Sometimes you poke through. You've gone too far. You have to back off a little bit. But that's how you move things forward. But a lot of the time in preparing your body for the most extreme situations, it is a way to reduce your risk of injury, right? Your body adapts, your bones, muscle, tendon, all of that adapts to stress. Even your brain does. So the more you can stress it and not tip over, the more resilient your body is. That's really what we're constantly trying to find, is how can we push in the right direction, understanding when to back off. But I think more importantly, you're always trying to find that ceiling. So if you're trying to rehab somebody, you could tell them not to do anything for 10 months and they're going to feel better. But like, did you actually fix the issue? Did you actually push the envelope and get them better?
And what happens when they
try
to play again? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with, let's say you want to break the world record in the 100-meter at the Olympics. Like, you can't run safely and slow all the time.
Right.
So it's constantly pushing and saying, how hard can I push? And then knowing your athlete or knowing your limitations of like, all right, I need to take a half step back here. And that in itself is injury reduction. It's stuff that we do throughout the entire football season. It'd be really easy to just not lift, to just not sprint. The guys would probably feel good, but you're actually doing a disservice to them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the artistry of it is, as funny as it is, like, we track a bunch of different things for our athletes and we have a really good idea of where they are on paper, but nothing is going to replace talking to them. And when you know your athletes, when someone tells me they're okay, I can tell you if they're okay or if they're not okay, just by talking to them.
Yeah.
The injury prevention side is, there's a very personal side to that, because something might not hurt me. It might hurt you, and it's the exact same thing. So you have to be able to kind of pick and choose and differentiate between all that.
Yeah. What role does like cross training play in your training? I know in that same interview, I think you were talking about how you have them doing yoga and dance and ways to. Is it more to get them thinking differently?
Yes, there's different components to it. Sometimes we do it just to break up the monotony, right? Or you put the body in different positions or to move differently. Like for football, for example, since that's what we're in season 4. I mean, you could make the argument all you need to do is just play football to train for football.
Right.
But that's not the case. You have to run, you have to jump, you have to there's a technical side, there's a performance side. And so in the cross training aspect, I think it's just giving your body a break, working different patterns, working different movements, with the same goal in mind of creating resiliency, not just in one direction or in one application, but universally. Whatever just gets thrown at your body, it can handle it. And I think football does a good job of that. In track, you have a distance, you have a speed that you're trying to hit. So you need to be resilient that way. But in football, like,
anything can happen.
And you get hit and you don't see it, like, anything can happen. And so you have to be able to train to move really well, bend and not break, to be fast, to be powerful. We have to train their brain to anticipate and react. And so it's the cross training aspect is mental, physical, it's all the above.
So we are a supplement company, obviously. And so nutrition is one of our key tenets. What focus do you put on different dietary strategies in your training with your athletes?
It's a huge piece of what we do. Sleep and nutrition are irreplaceable for us.
Yeah.
You know, if our guys or girls, if they just slept and ate appropriately, we would eliminate a lot of the issues that we see, and that's across all levels. I think the number one thing I do with an athlete when I work with them, so in prep for the Olympics this year, we ran blood work tests. We had a whole nutrition plan mapped out, just to see where the athlete was. We do it with our football players where we have our nutritionist on staff who works and creates those plans with them. And then, you know, myself, other members of the team, we all talk with him and figure out what's going on. So are we going to a hot environment? Is it humid? Are we playing in the morning? Are we playing in the evening? Are guys losing weight, gaining weight? Are we shifting lean mass if we want to? Are we putting on fat if we want to? Sometimes we do want to.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge piece because that is the fuel, that is the building blocks, that is the foundation for anything we want to do. So sleep and nutrition, if they're not dialed in, your training, your practice, you don't get out of it what you need to. So it honestly those become more important. And that was a huge emphasis this offseason for our football team was the appropriate body weights, the appropriate nutrition and sleep. And that would allow us to push really hard and hit that, you know, aim for that ceiling. If we don't, that ceiling gets lowered.
And I think that's a life principle. That's like moms and dads and students.
Yeah.
Like if you're eating what you're supposed to and you're sleeping what you're supposed to, things will go better.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you feel better, you recover better, everything about it is better.
Now, you've talked a little bit about the technological advancements and the data that you're using. Just talk a little bit about that and how has that changed maybe in the last 20 years?
Yeah, so now I think pretty much everything that can be done in sport can be tracked. And I don't think people realize to the level it can, but like every camera in a Major League Baseball stadium is of a high enough resolution that they send all of it to every team after every game. And they can see when the pitcher is releasing the ball, where his arm angle is. They can see where the batter's swinging, where he's stepping, like all of it. And so, you know, we track stuff in game on players and practice on players. When we're lifting, we can see all those movements and track all of it. But it's to a level where every camera becomes a piece of, you know, equipment, and it's gonna continue that way in all sports.
Right.
Baseball is really big into analytics and statistics, and so that's why it's kind of started there even more so. But it's all going to get broken down and used by AI. We use AI right now. We put our guys through a test in the off season and during season to see how well their sleep affects their performance. We track it with cameras. We track heart rate, their practice loads, what they're doing in the gym. And then we actually can use AI to break down in a couple movements if they're sleeping enough or how fatigued they are, and how that fatigue affects them. It's really getting into the weeds of, you know, if you have an athlete in a sport that's making millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, those athletes are essentially your product. And so we do our own R&D, our own development with those athletes of how hard can we push them? And to be able to do that, we need to know every little thing about them that we can.
Yeah. And you're figuring out just what is going to get the best performance and the best results for them too. I mean,
Yep.
they're the product, but they want
They
it.
want
They
it.
want
They,
it. They want to be performing at the
they come
highest
to me
level.
all the time and they'll be like, all right, my left hip on my third step when I'm pushing, I'm feeling this. And I'm like, all right, okay, well, let's figure that out or whatever. And for us, it's also figuring out like what is worth it. You know, there's so much out there that you could just go down a million different rabbit holes. But at the end of the day, is what we're doing, keeping our guys healthy, increasing their performance, and helping us win. That's kind of the three focuses that we have with it.
Now, we've talked a lot about the physical aspects of your training, but sports and life, right, are physical and mental.
Yep.
And in one of those interviews, you talked about how when they go to the NFL Combine, I think specifically, that they're not necessarily looking for how they play because they measure that, they track that, they know that. They want to see how people are doing with failure. You know, if they get in their own head, are they able to get back in the game, right? So what kind of focus do you put on that in training, and how do you help athletes with the mental side of the game?
Yeah, so depending on the athlete, we, you know, sometimes I'll coordinate with, you know, sports psychologists or mental performance coaches. We do with our football guys. We have stuff set up all the time for them. And then even with individuals, in sport, it's constantly you against you. You are playing other people, but if you mess up, depending on the sport, it's fully on you. I have athletes in track and field, right? You're at the Olympics. Something goes right, you win a gold medal, you're the best in the world. If you take second, no one knows. You take third, no one knows, but you're still elite. But that's a hard mental place to be. I won't go into a ton of details, but I had an athlete who won 2 gold medals last Olympics, was getting prepped for this Olympics, and had something out of her control happen during qualifying, and didn't make the team, and wasn't even able to actually do her event because she got tripped in her event. But now it becomes a 7-year block of winning a gold medal and even attempting to try to do it again, knowing that you are the best in the world. So now it's a whole different level of like in a football game, you miss a block, you have,
another block.
How many more plays coming, and you have how many guys on the team with you. Right. When it came to that situation, it was just, it was tough. Like, it's still something that we will work on and work through. But it's your mental game is just as important as your physical. We prep. We make sure the guys are mentally prepared, and the best way to give them that edge is physically they are prepared and they know that. And we even use the data and stuff we collect to say, hey, look,
on paper,
here's where you're at. I know it might be hard. I know you might not be feeling great right now, but you are actually optimally dialed in right now. And that gives them an edge. They can use that mental thing, like, you know what, you're right. And they push through, and we got to see it this weekend. We had some cool results on our side saying, hey, the guys are looking and feeling great going into this game. They went out and they were able to execute and do what they needed to do, and you win. And that's just when you can look back and be like, hey, we put a plan together. They knocked it out of the park, and now here's kind of the fruits of their labors. You win, and that's what makes sport fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've talked about recovery a little bit in aspects of nutrition and sleep. Anything else that you're doing to help athletes recover?
Like the biggest buckets, right? Sleep is number one. Nothing comes close to it. But if they're doing that right, and we track sleep and make sure they're going to bed at the right time, waking up at the right time, as game times change, we change that. As time zones change, we change that. But then at that point, if that's dialed in and nutrition's dialed in, we can start to play with some of your other stuff, whether it's sauna, hyperbaric chamber, red light therapy. There's a lot of stuff out there, but we're still trying to cause a physical and physiological change. And so the modalities that stress you like that, like sauna is a stressor, right. Cold tub is a stressor. All of those cause your body to stress and react and come back more resilient. And so that's really the name of the game of performance is you push as hard as you can, but you're trying to recover a little bit faster. If you can't recover a little bit faster and you just keep pushing, you keep falling a little bit further and further behind. So if the big blocks are knocked out, we have hyperbaric chamber at BYU. We have a red light therapy bed. We have stuff that increases blood flow to certain areas for injuries and that stuff. We use our hot and cold tubs. We use our compression sleeves. Like, there's a bunch of stuff. You're just trying to create movement. You're trying to create a little bit of stress and help that body come back a little bit more resilient, a little bit quicker.
Now, if you are not an elite athlete that is on a professional team or a college team, and you wanted to do stuff like that, is that an option for the average person if they're just looking to recover better?
Yeah. So there's a lot of like wellness spas and stuff that I've seen open up more and more and more. And I do think there's benefit to it all. It's all on a spectrum, depending on the kind of what you're doing and how hard you're pushing and, taking care of your life. I'm a dad. I get tired just as much as everybody. And I still try to train. I train, almost every day if I can, even if it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour if I'm lucky. But for me, I can feel a huge difference when I'm eating right, when I'm sleeping right. And as a dad, that's, relative.
Right.
But, it's taking time to take care of my body. I'll go to the sauna, the steam room, when I have time. And I make sure that, my wife has the same opportunities. We've tried to prioritize having yourself feel good so we can give more to our kids and push more, professionally. And so that's where there is a lot of benefit to it. I think I always tell people, check off your big boxes first. If you're not eating, if you're not sleeping, get those as dialed in as you can. And then go into some of those places and, whether it's a massage, red light therapy, hyperbaric chamber, some people like IV stuff. Like there is a benefit to it all. It's not going to replace the big stuff, but if you're doing all that other stuff right, it definitely can move the needle.
Yeah. So like sleep and nutrition is like still 80, 90% of it.
It is. And it has been since
that's just great.
The 1920s or whenever. I don't know when they started studying it. Everybody knew you needed sleep, but that's, sleep and nutrition.
Awesome. Well, Skyler,
can't get around it.
It's been fantastic having you here. Where can people find you online if they want to know more about you?
It's a great question. Probably easiest is just on social media at doc.mayne, M-A-Y-N-E.
Okay.
That's the easiest way. I don't have a website up anymore just because I'm
busy. You're a busy guy.
Little more exclusive with what I'm doing, but that's the best way to reach out. Happy to give tips and tricks wherever I can.
Okay, and you can always see his results by watching BYU football. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.